Hey everybody, welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe. And as always, I'm ready to dive into some seriously juicy info with you all today. It's like we're mixing up a knowledge cocktail here. Strong stuff, but oh, so smooth going down.
And I'm Sunny, your friendly neighborhood fact checker. I'll make sure we get all the ingredients right. Speaking of mixing things up, you know it's always a good blend? Travel whiskey and discovering awesome new things. You have to check out our friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life.
Yeah, Mickey's the best. He's always got something cool going on. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all our Sip and Talkers out there. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time zone you're waking up in, or maybe just winding down in, welcome back to Sip and Talk.
I've got my black coffee here, no sugar, just straight caffeine, and I am in a fantastic mood today.
I am right there with you. I am aggressively stirring a very large, very necessary iced Americano right now because I really need the caffeine for what we're about to get into today.
Yeah, you are going to need it because today we are looking at something that is just, well, it's a masterclass. It's a masterclass in logic, in human psychology, and honestly, in that very specific, very delicious moment when a rigidly scripted narrative just crashes headfirst into reality.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this has been all over my feed lately. I'm sure a lot of you listening have seen it too. It's this viral video circulating on TikTok, on Xiaohongshu, everywhere. And it involves a travel vlogger, a local resident in Vietnam, and literally one simple question that caused a complete system malfunction. System malfunction is honestly the perfect way to put it. I watched this clip, and I swear to you, you can actually see the exact moment the guy's brain hits the blue screen of death.
Yes.
You know, when your computer just freezes and makes that horrible buzzing sound? That was his face.
It's the facial expression for sure. It's like a computer glitch. He just completely freezes up.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't seen it yet, let's just set the scene a little bit. We have this Chinese travel vlogger who is visiting Vietnam. He's at a shop or maybe a restaurant, a very casual setting, right? And he decides to engage a local Vietnamese woman in a bit of, well, let's call it patriotic education.
Right, which isn't uncommon. We see this genre of content a lot online. The traveler who goes abroad, not just to see the world, but to sort of correct the world's understanding of their home country.
Exactly. It's a performance.
Yeah, it is. So he starts lecturing her, specifically about the status of Taiwan. He's pushing the standard line, saying Taiwan is China's, just period.
But here is the massive twist that he did not see coming. He didn't realize who he was actually talking to. This Vietnamese woman wasn't just politely nodding along. She actually used to work in Taiwan.
Oh, that is the best part.
Right. She speaks fluent Chinese. She lived there for over 10 years. And instead of getting angry or, arguing about history or shouting slogans back at him, she just looks at him calmly and asks one incredibly sharp question.
And that single question is the anchor for our entire conversation today.
Yeah.
She just asks him, is it China's now or is it China's later?
Is it China's now or is it China's later? I mean, I laughed so hard when I heard that. It is such a simple question, but it completely dismantled him on the spot.
It's brilliant. It's what logicians would call a semantic trap, but it's really a logic bomb. And that's our mission today on Sip and Talk. We aren't here to debate the territorial claims themselves. That's for the diplomats and politicians. We're here to look strictly at the logic of the argument.
Right, the actual mechanics of what happened in that conversation.
Exactly. We're going to unpack why that specific phrasing caused such a meltdown. We're going to look at the extremely surprising reaction from online netizens, which is honestly a whole story in itself. And then we are going to give you a toolkit of logic scalpels to help cut through these kinds of absolute narratives.
This is going to be such a fun one. So let's start with the glitch itself. Why did that specific phrasing break him so badly? Why couldn't he just give a straightforward answer?
Okay, let's slow this right down because the mechanism here is truly fascinating. It's what we call a constructive dilemma. See, the vlogger enters the conversation running a mental program we can call the grand narrative.
The grand narrative.
In this narrative, sovereignty is this abstract, eternal concept. It's entirely slogan-based. Taiwan is China's, period. End of sentence. It's an emotional and ideological statement for him.
Right. To him, that statement isn't a matter of international law or local administration or taxes. It's a statement of identity. It's like saying water is wet or the sky is blue. It's just an unquestionable fact in his reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the Vietnamese woman, she isn't operating in the abstract grand narrative. She is operating in what we call civil time or a time coordinate. She forces him to take his abstract slogan and place it onto a physical, realistic timeline. And that creates a double bind.
A dilemma where both choices lead to a logical failure for his argument.
Bingo. So let's play this out. Imagine I'm the vlogger, and you ask me the question. If I choose option A, and I say, it is China's right now, what happens logically?
Well, if you say it is China's now, you run into a massive logical flaw based on observable reality. If it is already yours, fully and completely, why are there constant military drills? Why is there nonstop diplomatic pressure? Why are there endless slogans about achieving reunification? You don't liberate or unify something that you already completely possess and control.
That makes total sense. It implies the job is already done. If I'm holding my coffee right now, I don't walk around the room screaming that I will one day hold this coffee. I just drink it.
Precisely. If he says now, he renders all of the state's efforts and posturing completely redundant. It makes the military exercises look like a pantomime. It implies that they are wasting massive resources fighting for something they supposedly already have in their pocket.
Okay, so he absolutely cannot say now. It totally contradicts the reality of the struggle. So he has to go with option B. He says, it is China's later.
But that is even more dangerous for him. If he admits that it is China's later, he is logically conceding that currently, in the present physical reality, it is not under that jurisdiction.
Right.
He is verbally recognizing a border. He's admitting that right now, today, there is a functional separation, and that crosses the absolute ultimate red line of his political correctness. He cannot admit that under any circumstances.
So the guy's completely trapped. He can't say now because it contradicts empirical reality, and he can't say later because it contradicts his internal political dogma.
Exactly. And that is exactly why he froze on camera. His brain was frantically searching for a third option that just doesn't exist in that binary. He literally ran out of valid syntax. And eventually, after that painful silence, he just stammers out, well, it always has been.
It always has been. Which just sounds like a broken record skipping.
It's a total glitch. It's a panicked retreat back into the abstract. By saying it always has been, he's just trying to ignore the physical reality of control, of administration, passports, currency, and just float back up into the safe clouds of his ideology. But by then, the damage was completely done.
Yeah, the woman's question utterly exposed the gap between his slogan and the world as it actually exists.
Yep.
And usually with these kinds of videos, you expect the comment section to be an absolute war zone.
Oh, totally. You expect so-called wolf warriors, the ultra-nationalist commenters, to just swarm the post. You'd think they would be attacking the Vietnamese woman, defending the vlogger to the death, spamming the comments.
Right. But that is not what happened here at all.
No, and this is where the story gets really, really fascinating. This is a huge reason why we're talking about this today. Because the reaction wasn't anger.
It was mockery. The comment section was full of people just ruthlessly roasting the vlogger.
It was a full-on roast session. I was scrolling through and I saw comments like, dude, you are embarrassing us abroad. And another one said, that was a logic strike from a higher dimension.
A logic strike from a higher dimension. That's incredible.
My personal favorite was someone else went out to, quote unquote, educate the world and failed miserably.
There was another comment that really cut through the noise for me. A commenter wrote, so if it's ours, can we go to our motherland, Taiwan, right now without a permit? Can I just buy a train ticket today?
Ooh, that is an absolute mic drop moment.
It really is. And it points to a major shift that I think we need to analyze. Why are these netizens, who we often stereotype from the outside as having this singular unified voice due to censorship, why are they openly laughing at this guy?
I think a massive part of it is just secondhand embarrassment. You know, that visceral feeling of cringe.
Oh yeah, the cringe factor is huge here.
Think about who is actually traveling abroad these days. It's the middle class, it's younger people, professionals. They want to be seen as modern, sophisticated, global citizens. They want to go to Vietnam or Thailand to drink good coffee, eat amazing pho, and take nice aesthetic photos for their social media.
Right, they're just on vacation.
Exactly. They do not want to be associated with these angry, sweaty political preachers yelling at locals. So when they see this guy doing exactly that and failing so publicly and spectacularly, they feel ashamed. It's a collective groan of please don't think we are all like him.
That's a very good point. It's a basic desire for normalcy. And I think there is also this memification of nationalism happening right now.
Yeah.
The whole phrase educating the world has basically become a meme in itself.
Oh, for sure. It's used sarcastically now to mock people who completely lack self-awareness. It's almost become a way to signal your own social status. Like, I am sophisticated and grounded in reality, while this guy is low class and completely brainwashed by slogans.
This is totally a class signifier. But it makes me wonder, does this mean the Great Firewall isn't really working anymore? Or is it just leaking?
I think we have to accept that the information wall is porous. It's never been completely watertight. Reality inevitably seeps through. Logic seeps through. Even if you can't access certain search engines or encyclopedias directly, people travel, they talk to locals, they consume foreign media.
And like this vlogger, they literally run into people like the Vietnamese woman who just hit them with facts.
Exactly. And that collision creates massive cognitive dissonance. You have the grand narrative that tells you sovereignty is this eternal, absolute thing.
Yeah.
And then you have empirical reality.
Yeah.
The Vietnamese woman didn't have a PhD in political science. She didn't read a manifesto. She just had 10 years of actual life experience. She earned a Taiwanese salary. She spent Taiwanese currency. She held a visa issued by that specific government. Her lived empirical reality just smashed his empty slogan to pieces.
And the commenters saw that immediately.
Yeah.
They recognized that her reality carried so much more weight than his words.
It was a collective moment of clarity, and I think it shows that you can control the flow of information to a certain extent, but you simply cannot completely extinguish human logic. When people see a logical slam dunk, they recognize it, regardless of whatever political training they've had.
It's weirdly comforting, isn't it? To see that basic logic is universal.
It really is. It's a huge relief. It proves that critical thinking is incredibly resilient.
So this brings us to the real meat of our discussion today, because as we were looking at this, we realized that this now or later question is actually a specific type of tool. It's a blueprint for how to dismantle dogma without having to shout or get angry.
Right. Because the goal isn't to just scream louder than the other person. It's about utilizing reductio ad absurdum, which is Latin for reduction to absurdity. You take the opponent's logic, you pretend to accept it as entirely true, and then you just follow that exact logic down the path until it leads to a completely ridiculous conclusion.
Exactly. We've gathered a few case studies of this from our notes to share with you. These are practical examples of how this kind of logic can be applied to different nationalist or essentialist arguments. And honestly, these are stories you can totally use at a dinner party if the conversation gets a little too heated.
Let's look at case study number 1, identity versus culture. We hear this argument all the time. It goes something like, you are ethnically from this place, therefore you must politically support the government of this place.
Oh, I know the perfect story for this. It's the one about a Chinese student and a Malaysian Chinese student, right?
That's the one. So picture a university cafeteria. Maybe it's in London or New York or Sydney. You have a student from China, let's just call him student A, and he's scolding a Malaysian Chinese student. Let's call him student B.
Setting the scene.
Right. So student A says to student B, you speak Chinese, you celebrate the Lunar New Year, your ancestors originally came from China, so you are Chinese, you must support the motherland, and if you don't, you are actively betraying your ancestors.
Wow. That is a heavy guilt trip to lay on someone. Betraying your ancestors. It completely conflates bloodlines with modern politics. So how do you counter something that emotionally charged using logic?
You don't argue about the ancestors at all. You just flip the script on them. The Malaysian student simply asks, do you speak English?
Okay. And the Chinese student says, well, of course I do. I'm studying abroad here. I have to write all my university papers in English.
Right. Then the Malaysian student asks, do you wear a suit? Do you check the time on a Western-style wristwatch? Do you use a smartphone with an operating system that was developed in California?
And the guy's going to say, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Everyone uses those things.
And here comes the absolute checkmate. The Malaysian student says, well, according to your exact logic, because I adopted Chinese cultural traditions, I belong to China politically. So because you have adopted the English language and Western clothing styles and Western technology, have you betrayed your ancestors? Have you officially become British or American?
Boom. That is beautiful. It's just devastating.
It really is. It completely forces the distinction between culture, which is your heritage, your food, your language, your festivals, and nationality, which is purely about laws, taxes, and passports. If adopting a culture equals political loyalty, then the Chinese student is technically a traitor just for learning English.
I absolutely love that. It takes all the emotional pressure off the concept of identity and puts it squarely back on the legal definition. It proves that culture is fluid and is shared across borders, while politics is rigid and geographically bound. You can deeply love a culture without owing any allegiance whatsoever to the state that currently occupies that land.
Exactly. It untangles the knot perfectly. Now let's move on to case study number 2. This one is huge in geopolitics. Sovereignty and time.
Ah, yes, the classic since ancient times argument.
We hear this regarding territorial disputes all over the world, but it is especially loud in this specific context. The argument is always, this piece of land belongs to us today because it was ours since ancient times.
It sounds super convincing at first glance because it appeals to this sense of deep history. Like, we were here first. It feels like someone waving an ancient property deed in your face.
But history is incredibly long, and borders change constantly through wars, treaties, and empires rising and falling. If we are going to freeze history at one specific point to determine modern ownership, who actually gets to pick the date?
Right. Why is the map from 1750 the quote-unquote real map and not the map from 1350 or 900?
Exactly. So the logical counter to this argument is what we call the Mongol Empire boomerang.
The Mongol Empire boomerang. I really like the sound of that. How does this boomerang work?
Well, if someone argues we own this territory right now because our dynasty owned it in the 18th century, you simply say, okay, let's play by those rules, but let's go back just a little bit further. Let's go back to the 13th century.
The 1200s.
Right. In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire completely conquered and ruled China. The Yuan dynasty was entirely Mongol-led. They ruled the whole territory. Beijing was literally the winter capital for the Great Khan. So by applying that exact since ancient times logic consistently, shouldn't Beijing be paying its daily taxes to Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, today?
Wow. Right, because if we strictly follow the logic that ancient possession equals current unquestionable sovereignty, then Mongolia technically has a legitimate claim on, well, basically half the known world.
Exactly. Russia, China, huge parts of the Middle East, Eastern Europe.
That highlights the absurdity of the argument perfectly. It exposes that the phrase since ancient times is really just a polite way of saying, I am selectively picking the historical map that makes my current territory look the biggest.
Precisely. If you are going to claim the historical rights of your ancestors' conquerors, you logically also have to accept the territorial debts of when your ancestors were the ones being conquered. You cannot just cherry-pick the timeline to suit your current political agenda. It's just selective history weaponized for modern gains.
That is such a sharp way to cut through that noise. Okay, let's look at case study number 3. This one is a bit more modern, a bit more everyday. We're calling it consumerism and patriotism. The iPhone versus the bullet.
Oh, we see this in online comment sections literally all the time. It's the internet moral police. Someone will post an innocent photo of their brand new iPhone or their new foreign car, and suddenly an angry commenter screams, "Why are you buying American goods? You are sending bullets to the enemy. You are a traitor to the nation."
It's this bizarre idea that every single dollar you spend is a direct vote for a foreign nation's military defense. If you buy a Tesla or an iPhone, you are personally funding the U.S. military to oppress you.
Right. But again, let's just use the logic scalpel on this guy. The person aggressively typing out that comment calling you a traitor, how exactly are they posting it?
Well, they're posting it on the internet.
And what exactly is the internet? It runs on TCP/IP protocols. And who invented those protocols? The U.S. Department of Defense. And the processor inside their phone or their laptop uses a specific instruction set, usually by 86 or ARM. That is entirely Western technology. Even the Android operating system running on a domestic Chinese phone is built on a Linux kernel.
So the logical counter-argument to the angry commenter is, hey, I buy an iPhone to deeply study the enemy's technology so we could eventually beat them. That is my grand strategy. So why is your usage of American internet protocols considered a brilliant strategy, but my usage of an American smartphone is considered high treason?
It completely exposes the blatant double standard. It's what we call the essentialist trap. They desperately want to define your actions as inherently evil and traitorous, and define their own identical actions as necessary and strategic, even when both of you are just doing the exact same thing, participating in a normal, globalized, modern economy.
Yeah, it's just, I am being strategic and clever, but you are being a brainwashed traitor. It really just shows that these extreme accusations are purely about asserting power over someone else, not about actual consistent logic. It's about bullying someone into conformity using patriotism as a club.
Absolutely. And that perfectly leads us to a much broader concept that we want to share. We really want to give our Sip&Talkers, and especially anyone listening from inside a firewall who might be tuning in via a VPN right now, a specific set of conversational tools. We call them the logic scalpels.
Logic scalpels. I love this visual. We're taking a precise blade and just surgically cutting right through the thick cocoon of the grand narrative.
These are practical tools for metacognition. Now, that's just a fancy academic word for thinking about thinking. It's the ability to step completely outside of your own head and objectively look at the structural framework of your own thoughts and the thoughts of the person you're debating.
Okay, lay them on me. Let's start with scalpel number 1, mirroring.
Mirroring directly addresses the brainwashed defense. You know, when you are debating someone who is extremely deep with a nationalist narrative, eventually, when they completely run out of factual arguments, they will inevitably play their trump card and say, you just think that because you are completely brainwashed by Western media.
Yeah, that's the ultimate conversation ender right there. Because you can't really argue with your brainwashed. It's designed to retroactively invalidate every single logical point you just made.
Exactly. But you can mirror it back at them. The perfect response is simply to ask, do you think it is remotely possible that we think you are the one who is brainwashed?
Oh, that is very good. It instantly establishes symmetry in the conversation.
It forces them straight out of what I call the God view. They genuinely think they are the objective, enlightened observer, and you are just the tragic, manipulated victim. By asking this one question, you force them to realize that the exact same accusation logically works in reverse. You are establishing that we are just two equal human beings looking at each other across a table, not an enlightened teacher talking down to a foolish student.
It totally levels the playing field.
Yeah.
It makes them realize that the concept of brainwashing is just a relative perspective, not an objective, measurable fact, which perfectly sets up scalpel number 2, perspective taking, or what we call the empathy bridge.
This one naturally follows the first one. Once you establish that mirroring, you say, well, if you can logically understand why we might think you were brainwashed, then you are clearly capable of understanding our underlying position.
Wait, walk me through the mechanics of that one a bit more.
I call it logic kidnapping. If they respond by saying, yes, I know you think I'm brainwashed because your corrupt media tells you lies about my amazing country, they have just accidentally admitted that they can successfully simulate your internal thought process. They have willingly stepped into your shoes just to explain your perceived error.
And once they step into our shoes, even for a second,
they have permanently cracked their own absolute truth. They have openly admitted that there is an entirely different perspective that follows its own internal logical chain, even if they deeply believe the initial premises are wrong. It completely humanizes the quote-unquote enemy. You aren't just a mindless zombie anymore. You are a rational person with a specific, traceable reason for thinking what you think.
That is so subtle, but incredibly powerful. It plants that tiny little seed that says, hey, maybe the other side isn't completely crazy after all. Okay, I'm ready for scalpel number 3. This is the big factual one, right? Information entropy.
Yes, this is the firewall fact. The core argument here is devastatingly simple. You just ask, which country currently has a massive digital firewall actively preventing its own citizens from seeing diverse global information?
Right. And it's a completely verifiable fact. We aren't just making it up. We could reference global data from Reporters Without Borders or Freedom House rankings. It's objectively measurable. But the logic we use to frame it is the wrong way driver analogy.
Okay, picture this. Imagine you were driving down a massive, busy highway. Suddenly, you see a car coming straight at you driving the wrong way. You swerve out of the way, but then you see another car coming at you, and another. Soon, you realize hundreds of cars are all driving directly towards you, and you are sitting there screaming, look at all these absolute idiots driving the wrong way.
But the reality of that situation is you were the one in the wrong lane.
Exactly. If literally everyone else on the road is going the other way, you are the statistical anomaly. You are the danger. So let's apply this exact analogy to the complex issue of the diplomatic recognition of Taiwan.
Okay, let's look at the actual data. The international highway, so to speak.
Currently, if you look at official diplomatic ties, only about 12 relatively small nations, places like Belize, Haiti, the Vatican, officially recognize the ROC, or Taiwan, as a sovereign country.
Right, so the staunch nationalist points at that statistic and says, see, the score is 180 to 12. We are the main traffic flow. You are the crazy wrong-way driver. Case closed.
But there's a massive twist here. The twist lies in the actual functional reality of how those 180 nations operate on a daily basis. The United States, the European Union, Japan, Australia, all these major players. They might officially acknowledge Beijing's position on a piece of diplomatic paper, but in reality,
they trade directly with Taiwan. They sell advanced defensive arms directly to Taiwan. They grant automatic visa-free entry to people holding Taiwanese passports. They functionally treat Taiwan as a completely distinct, self-governing entity.
Precisely. So the wrong way driver analogy isn't about who is on some official diplomatic mailing list. It is entirely about the belief that the PRC currently physically governs the island of Taiwan.
That is the core of it.
Yes. If you genuinely believe that Beijing is currently in charge of Taipei, collecting their taxes and passing their local laws, you are the wrong way driver. The entire globe operates every single day on the physical reality of separation. The One China principle is very often just a polite diplomatic fiction that simply allows global trade to happen smoothly, but the functional boots-on-the-ground reality is independence.
And bringing it back to the firewall argument, that really seals the deal. If your grand narrative is the absolute, unquestionable truth, why in the world do you need a giant wall to protect it?
Exactly. Truth is naturally robust. Truth can easily withstand questions and scrutiny. If a governing system requires a massive, multi-billion-dollar digital wall just to prevent its own people from seeing alternative viewpoints, it heavily implies that the core narrative is incredibly fragile. It implies that the grand narrative simply cannot survive direct contact with the actual truth.
It's like if you have to heavily padlock all the doors from the inside just to keep your family from leaving the house, maybe it's not actually a very happy home.
That is a brutally accurate way to put it.
So we've really dismantled the logic here today. We've looked at the specific tools. We've talked about the Mongol boomerang. We've talked about the iPhone logic, the wrong way driver. But I really want to bring this whole conversation back down to the human element, back to that casual little shop in Vietnam.
Let's focus on that Vietnamese woman again, because she is the real hero of this story. Why was she so incredibly powerful in that specific moment? Why did she effortlessly win that interaction?
Because she wasn't reading from a state-sponsored script. She wasn't citing some dense political science thesis. She just had empirical evidence. She had 10 real years of her life. She knew exactly what kind of money was sitting in her pocket. She knew exactly which local laws she had to follow when she lived there. She knew which specific national holidays she got off from work.
It is the ultimate showdown of lived experience versus rigid dogma. Her everyday reality completely crushed his abstract slogan. It's exactly like trying to aggressively argue that it is raining outside when everyone else is happily standing around in the bright sunshine. You can scream, "It's raining," as loud and as often as you want, but if my shirt is dry, my shirt is dry.
And the reaction from the comment section we talked about earlier, we highlighted the mockery and the jokes, but I honestly think there is something much deeper and more significant happening there. It's a clear sign of what I would call rational recovery.
Rational recovery. I really like that term. What does that look like to you?
It proves that despite the massive firewall, despite an entire lifetime of a very specific education system, individual human logic still exists and thrives. People are inherently capable of self-correction. When they see something that is objectively absurd, they laugh at it. And that laughter is a sign of societal health. It shows the brain isn't fully broken.
It really is. It's like an immune system response to bad logic. But I do think I have to add a bit of a cold reflection here to balance things out. We really have to be careful not to be overly optimistic about what this means on a macro scale.
Fair enough. Go on, give us the reality check.
Seeing this mockery online doesn't mean state policy has suddenly changed. Beijing isn't going to look at a trending video and say, "Oh, wow, good point from that Vietnamese lady. Let's immediately go and rewrite our national constitution."
Right.
The machinery of the state is massive, it's incredibly slow, and it is fundamentally driven by raw power and control, not just by who wins a logical debate on social media.
So we shouldn't get our hopes up for some sort of sudden overnight political shift just because people are laughing at a vlogger.
No, definitely not. But it does absolutely prove that individual logic is incredibly resilient. It proves that the single state-mandated narrative isn't nearly as total or as flawless as we sometimes fear it is. When everyday people briefly step out of the information cocoon, whether they are physically traveling to a place like Vietnam or just virtually traveling by turning on a VPN, the cracks in the narrative appear almost immediately.
And honestly, that is exactly where the real hope lies. Not in anticipating the sudden collapse of a massive government, but in trusting the quiet resilience of the human mind.
Exactly. The core question from that video, is it yours now or is it yours later? It's a universal tool. It doesn't just apply to the Taiwan issue. It expertly applies to any strict dogma. You can use it anywhere. You can ask, is the economy great right now, or are you promising it will be great later?
Well, that's good.
Are we completely safe now, or are you saying we will be safe later? It forces immediate accountability.
It absolutely forces the timeline out of the shadows. It forces the person to stop hiding in the future and look squarely at the present moment.
And remember, the real goal of using these tools, we've talked about the mirroring, the time coordinates, the scalpels. The goal isn't to forcefully win the argument in some nasty, aggressive way. You are never going to magically deprogram a hardcore nationalist in a 5-minute comment section battle.
Yeah, you aren't going to get them to suddenly drop to their knees and say, oh my God, you're right, I was wrong about my entire worldview.
No, of course not. The realistic goal is just to plant a tiny seed of doubt, to leave a little logical pebble in their shoe so that maybe later, maybe 3 days later when they're riding the bus, or even 3 years later, they suddenly stop and think, wait a minute, why did I stutter when she asked me that? Why couldn't I just give her a straight answer?
And that tiny pebble is exactly what leads to real intellectual growth. That's what eventually leads to breaking down the massive information asymmetry in the world.
And that is exactly what we advocate for every single week right here on this show. We aren't anti-anyone. We are fiercely pro-logic. We are pro-fact. We simply want a world where people can talk honestly about reality without having to constantly filter every thought through a pre-approved slogan.
Exactly. Sip and Talk does not discriminate at all. We never attack any specific group of people. We just want to look at objective facts, clear logic, and promote independent thinking. And we strongly encourage everyone listening today, especially those of you who might be creatively listening from inside China right now, maybe routing through a VPN, to just keep asking those hard questions, keep breaking that asymmetry.
Don't ever be afraid to be the one person in the room who calmly asks, is it now or is it later?
It really is a great question for everyday life, honestly. Like, am I going to do the laundry right now or later? Usually it's later.
Usually later for me too. Or honestly, maybe never.
But for the really big stuff, the stuff that matters, let's try to focus on the now.
Absolutely.
Well, before we wrap up today, we do have a little call to action for you guys.
Yes, we do. If you enjoyed this logical breakdown today, if you like this specific kind of analysis where we don't just passively read the news, but actively take the arguments apart piece by piece, please subscribe to Sip and Talk. Leave us a nice review on whatever platform you use. It genuinely helps us find more clear-headed, logical thinkers just like you.
And we also have a very special shout out today to an old friend of the show. You guys all know Mickey.
Yes, our good friend Mickey.
He runs an awesome YouTube channel called Mickey to Life. He does these incredible travel vlogs, and they are just fantastic. He goes to some truly amazing places around the world. But Mickey,
we are definitely watching you.
You really need to update your channel faster, man.
Yeah.
We're sitting here waiting for the new content.
Seriously, Mickey, get on it. We need the new videos. Everyone listening, go subscribe to Mickey to Life on YouTube. Who knows, maybe he'll run into some interesting logic puzzles on his travels too, and we can talk about them here.
We can certainly hope so.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening today. Keep sipping, keep talking, and always keep thinking.
Have a highly logical and clear-headed week, everyone.
Bye, guys.